What happens when a music legend gets tired of being talked down to by a talk show host who thinks she knows everything? Well, you're about to witness one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Chaka Khan, the queen of funk herself, absolutely demolished Joy Behar right there on the View set, and the entire audience was left speechless. This was not your typical celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a masterclass in how to handle disrespect with pure class and devastating precision. The tension started building the moment Chaka Khan walked onto the View set. You could feel something was off from the very beginning. Joy Behar wore that smug expression she gets when she thinks she's about to school someone, completely unaware that she was about to meet her match. The other hosts, Whoopi, Sarah, Sunny, and Alyssa, seemed to sense something brewing. But none of them could have predicted what was coming. The studio lights hummed overhead, casting their unforgiving glow on a set that had hosted countless interviews over the years. But this morning, something felt different. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the kind that makes production assistants shift uncomfortably behind the cameras and stage managers hold their breath just a little too long. Joy started with what seemed like a harmless question. But anyone who knows her style could hear the condescension dripping from her voice like honey laced with venom. So, Chaka, you've been in the music business for what, 50 years now? That must feel like forever in pop music terms. The words hung in the air, dismissive, reductive, designed to diminish. It was the kind of question that seemed innocent on the surface, but carried the weight of someone trying to shrink a legend down to size. Chaka Khan, dressed in a stunning purple ensemble that commanded respect before she even spoke, turned those piercing eyes directly toward Joy. These were eyes that had intimidated industry executives for decades, eyes that had seen the music industry's darkest corners and emerged victorious. She looked at Joy with a gaze that could cut through steel. Actually, Joy, I've been blessed to have a career that spans over 5 decades, she began, her voice smooth as silk and just as strong. And unlike some people in television, I've managed to stay relevant without tearing others down. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the usual celebrity politeness they were used to seeing. Chaka had just thrown down a gauntlet, and Joy, being Joy, was too arrogant to pick up on the warning. Joy laughed, that fake laugh she does when she's been called out, but wants to pretend she's still in control. It was a hollow sound, bouncing off the studio walls like a rubber ball that had lost its bounce. Oh, well, aren't you feisty today? I'm just saying, the music industry has changed so much. I mean, do young people even know who you are anymore? The question landed like a slap across the face. But Chaka didn't flinch. She had been fighting for respect her entire career, and she knew exactly how to handle someone who underestimated her. Whoopi tried to jump in with a nervous laugh, sensing the danger building like storm clouds on the horizon. Come on, Joy. Everyone knows Chaka Khan. But Chaka held up her hand, never breaking eye contact with Joy. The gesture was calm, deliberate, and carried the weight of someone who was about to change the course of this conversation entirely. Let me stop you right there, Joy. Young people not only know who I am, they sample my music, they cover my songs, and they show me more respect in 5 minutes than you've managed in 30 seconds. A pause hung in the air, thick and heavy. But let me ask you something, Chaka continued, her voice dropping to that dangerous register that every seasoned performer knows how to use. When was the last time someone under 40 knew your name for something other than being loud and wrong on television? The studio went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you hyper-aware of every breath you take. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and disappear completely. Sunny Hostin's mouth hung slightly open in shock, her carefully prepared talking points forgotten. This was live television at its most brutal, the kind of moment that makes producers reach for the emergency commercial break button. Joy's face flushed a deep crimson, and you could see her brain scrambling to regain control of the situation. But she had never faced an opponent like this before. Chaka Khan wasn't just another celebrity guest who would smile politely and let the conversation move on. She was a woman who had fought her way through the music industry's ugliest trenches, who had faced down sexism, racism, and every obstacle imaginable to become the legend she was today. "Listen here," Joy said, her voice straining as she tried to reassert her authority. "I've been doing television longer than most people have been alive. I think I know how to conduct an interview." Chaka leaned back in her chair, completely composed, like she was about to deliver a masterpiece. The movement was unhurried, almost regal. She crossed her legs with the elegance of someone who had graced countless stages around the world. "Oh, you think this is an interview? I thought this was you trying to make yourself feel important by diminishing my accomplishments." She paused, letting the words sink in. "See, that's the difference between us, Joy. I build people up with my art. You tear them down with your words." Joy was scrambling now, realizing she had picked the wrong person to mess with. But she couldn't back down. Her pride wouldn't allow it, and the cameras were rolling. "I wasn't trying to diminish anything. I was just making conversation." "No," Chaka said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "What you were doing was being disrespectful. And frankly, I'm tired of it." Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of someone who had dealt with difficult personalities her entire career. This wasn't anger. It was something far more powerful. It was the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and no reason to tolerate disrespect. "You started this conversation by suggesting my career was basically over. Then you question whether young people know me, all while sitting there like you're some kind of authority on music and culture." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Joy's with an intensity that made the entire studio feel like a pressure cooker. "News flash, Joy or not." The camera kept cutting to the other hosts, who clearly had no idea how to handle this situation. Whoopi was making faces like she was watching a car crash in slow motion, equal parts horrified and fascinated. Sarah looked like she was silently praying for a commercial break that would never come. Sunny had her hand pressed against her forehead, unable to believe what she was witnessing. Joy tried to laugh it off again, but her voice was shaking slightly. The confident facade was cracking, and everyone could see it. "Well, I certainly didn't mean any disrespect." But Chaka wasn't having it. "Oh, but you didn't mean it, Joy. That's exactly what you meant." She sat up straighter, her posture radiating authority. "See, I've been in this business long enough to recognize when someone is trying to play games with me. And I don't play games, honey. I end them." The audience was completely captivated. This wasn't just a clash between two strong personalities. This was a veteran entertainer showing a talk show host exactly what happens when you underestimate someone's intelligence and grace under pressure. Joy was starting to get defensive, which was exactly where Chaka wanted her. "I think you're overreacting a bit here." Shaka's eyebrows raised slowly, and everyone in that studio knew Joy had just made a fatal error. The expression on Shaka's face was one of measured disbelief. The kind of look you give someone who has just said something so profoundly wrong that you need a moment to process it. "Overreacting? Let me tell you what overreacting looks like, Joy." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow filled the entire room. "Overreacting would be me walking off this set right now and telling everyone exactly what kind of person you really are behind the cameras." She paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "Overreacting would be me using my platform to show people the receipts of how you treat guests when you think the cameras aren't rolling." Another pause, this one even more deliberate. "What I'm doing right now is giving you a chance to apologize and move on with some dignity intact." Joy was visibly flustered now, her usual confidence completely shattered. She shifted in her seat, looking around at her co-host for support that wasn't coming. "I don't think I need to apologize for doing my job. Your job is to interview guests, not insult them." Chaka fired back without missing a beat. "But since you brought up jobs, let's talk about that." She gestured with her hand, the movement fluid and commanding. "My job has been making music that moves people's souls for over 50 years. Your job seems to be sitting at this table, making people uncomfortable with your ignorance." She let the words sink in before delivering the final blow. "I'd say one of us is definitely better at their job than the other." The other hosts were exchanging glances, clearly torn between wanting to support their colleague and recognizing that Joy had walked into this mess all by herself. Alyssa Farrah-Griffin looked like she was taking mental notes on how to handle difficult situations with class and composure. Joy was getting more agitated by the minute, realizing that her usual tactics weren't working on someone who had faced down record executives, difficult producers, and industry politics for decades. "I've been nothing but professional here." Chaka let out a laugh that could have melted steel, a sound rich with irony and barely contained amusement. "Professional? Joy, if this is your idea of professional, I'd hate to see what you consider rude." She leaned forward, counting off on her fingers like she was teaching a child a lesson they should have learned long ago. "You spent the last 5 minutes questioning my relevance, my impact, and basically suggesting that my career is a relic of the past. In what world is that professional?" The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And Chaka was just getting started. Joy was clearly feeling the heat now, and instead of backing down gracefully, she decided to double down on her mistake, a fatal error that would only make the coming moments more devastating. "Look, I think we're getting a little too heated here. This is supposed to be a fun interview about your new project." Chaka tilted her head slightly, like a predator studying its prey. The movement was subtle but unmistakable, the kind of gesture that makes experienced interviewers suddenly aware that they've lost control of the situation. "You spend 10 minutes trying to tear me down, and now that I'm fighting back, suddenly you want to change the subject to something productive?" The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. This wasn't just entertainment anymore. This was a masterclass in how to handle disrespect with surgical precision. Joy tried to regain some authority in her voice, but it came out strained and desperate. "I was never trying to tear you down. I think you're being overly sensitive." Those words hit the studio like a thunderbolt. Whoopi's eyes widened. Sarah actually gasped audibly. Sunny put her hand to her forehead like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Joy had just called Chaka Khan, a woman who had fought through decades of industry sexism and racism, who had broken barriers and smashed glass ceilings, overly sensitive. Chaka's response was devastating in its calm delivery. "Overly sensitive, Joy? Let me explain something to you." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to that dangerous register again. "When you've survived what I've survived in this industry, when you've had to prove yourself over and over again to people who didn't want you to succeed, you develop a very clear understanding of when someone is trying to diminish you." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And that's exactly what you've been doing since I sat down." Joy was stammering now, realizing she had stepped in it big time. Her usual sharp wit had abandoned her, leaving her flailing for words that wouldn't come. "I really don't think that's fair." "Fair?" Chaka leaned forward, her voice dropping to that dangerous tone that every seasoned performer knows how to use. "You want to talk about fair?" She began counting off points, each one landing like a hammer blow. "Is it fair that you invited me here, supposedly to discuss my work, but instead decided to spend your time questioning whether I'm still relevant?" She held up another finger. "Is it fair that you think you can talk to me like I'm some newcomer who doesn't know the business?" A third finger. "Is it fair that when I defend myself, you call me overly sensitive?" Joy was floundering now, looking around at her co-hosts for support, but they were all smart enough to stay out of this. The message was clear. Joy had created this situation, and she was going to have to find her own way out. "I just think maybe we got off on the wrong foot." "No, Joy," Chaka said, her voice sharp and precise. "We got off on the foot you chose. You made a decision to start this conversation with disrespect, and now you're surprised that I'm not just sitting here taking it with a smile." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the studio. "See, that's the problem with people like you. You think because someone is a guest on your show, they have to accept whatever treatment you dish out." The camera was capturing every micro-expression, every uncomfortable shift in the room. Joy was sweating now. Her makeup started to show the stress of being completely outmatched by someone who had decades of experience handling difficult personalities. But Joy, still unable to recognize her defeat, made another fatal mistake. She decided to get aggressive. Now, wait just a minute. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by you. The studio went so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. That low mechanical whir that usually fades into the background, but becomes deafening in moments of complete silence. Chaka slowly sat back in her chair, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth that every person in that room recognized as dangerous. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Oh, but you do, Joy, because you created this situation." She gestured with her hand, the movement unhurried and deliberate. "You could have been respectful. You could have been professional. You could have actually done your job. But instead, you chose to try to make yourself look important by making me look small." She paused, leaning forward slightly. "The only problem with that strategy is that I don't make small, honey. I make legendary." Joy's voice was getting higher and more strained. The polished television professional replaced by someone who had lost control and couldn't find her way back. "I think you're completely mischaracterizing what happened here." "Am I?" Chaka's smile widened. "Let's review, shall we?" She counted on her fingers like she was teaching a child a lesson they should have learned long ago. "First, you suggested my 50-year career was basically ancient history. Then, you questioned whether young people know who I am. Then, when I responded with grace and intelligence, you called me feisty, like I was some untrained pet." She held up another finger. "When I continued to defend myself, you told me I was overreacting and overly sensitive." She tilted her head, studying Joy like a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. "Did I miss anything? Or would you like to add some more insults to the list?" Joy was completely trapped now, and everyone in the studio could see it. Her usual arsenal of verbal jabs had been rendered useless against someone who simply refused to be diminished. "I didn't mean those things the way you took them." "Oh, but you did mean them exactly the way I took them," Chaka replied smoothly. "The problem is you're not used to people calling you out on your behavior. You're used to celebrities coming on here, taking whatever you dish out, and leaving quietly." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But I'm not most celebrities, Joy. I am Chaka, and I didn't get where I am by letting people disrespect me." Whoopi finally tried to intervene, clearly desperate to save what was left of the show. The veteran host had seen many tense moments on this set, but nothing quite like this. "Ladies, maybe we should take a breath here." Chaka turned to Whoopi with a respectful nod. She had nothing but admiration for the EGOT-winning performer sitting across from her. "Whoopi, I have nothing but respect for you and this show. But your colleague here decided to start something she clearly can't finish. And I'm not going to pretend that's okay just to make everyone comfortable." Joy was grasping for any way to regain control, any foothold she could use to climb back to high. "Because I guarantee you, based on what I've experienced in the last 15 minutes, I'm not the first person you've treated this way. I'm just the first one with enough experience and confidence to call you out on it." Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear completely, shrinking back in her chair. Alyssa was clearly studying how Chaka was handling this situation with such composure under pressure, taking mental notes for future reference. Joy tried one more desperate move, hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. "I think we should probably move on to talking about your music." Chaka's laugh was rich and full, filling the entire studio with its warmth and irony. "Now you want to talk about my music? After spending all this time trying to convince everyone that my music doesn't matter anymore." She shook her head slowly, the gesture one of genuine disbelief. "Joy, you can't insult someone and then expect them to perform for you. That's not how respect works." Joy's face was getting redder by the minute, a flush of anger and humiliation spreading across her features. "I never said your music didn't matter. You didn't have to say it directly," Chaka replied, her voice calm and measured. "Your whole approach, your tone, your questions, they all suggested that you think I'm some has-been who should be grateful for the opportunity to be on your show." She paused, letting the accusation land. "But here's the thing, Joy, I'm Chaka. People don't do me favors by having me on their show. I do them favors by showing up." The audience was completely captivated. This wasn't just a celebrity feud. This was a clinic in how to handle disrespect with class, intelligence, and devastating effectiveness. Joy was now visibly angry, her professional facade completely cracking. The polished television personality had been replaced by someone who had been backed into a corner and didn't know how to find the exit. I think you're being incredibly unfair and hostile. Chaka's response was swift and brutal. Hostile, Joy? If I was being hostile, you would know it. What I'm being is honest. She paused, letting the words sink in. And apparently you're not used to people being honest with you about how your behavior affects them. That's not my problem. That's yours. Joy was spiraling now, her usual confidence completely shattered. And then she made the biggest mistake of the entire confrontation. Standing up slightly in her chair, she pointed her finger at Chaka and raised her voice. A move that would prove to be her undoing. You know what? I don't have to take this from you or anyone else. This is my show, and I'll ask whatever questions I want to ask. The entire studio went dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze, their hands hovering over their equipment, as if unsure whether to keep rolling. Joy had just pulled rank on Chaka Khan, and everyone in that room knew she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Chaka didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply looked at Joy with the kind of stare that had intimidated music executives for 5 decades, a gaze that had silenced rowdy crowds and brought the most difficult producers to heel. When she spoke, her tone was so calm it was terrifying. Your show, Joy? Let me tell you something about shows. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Joy's. I've been the headlining act on stages around the world since before you even thought about television. I've commanded audiences of hundreds of thousands of people, and every single one of them paid good money to see me perform. She paused, letting the words sink in. This little daytime talk show you're so proud of? This is cute, but don't ever mistake having a microphone for having power over me. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She had never been spoken to like this on her own show. She clearly had no idea how to respond. Chaka wasn't finished. And another thing, Joy, you want to talk about your show? Your show invited me here. Your producers called my people because they wanted the legendary Chaka Khan to grace this set with her presence. She gestured around the studio, her movements unhurried and deliberate. So don't you dare sit there and act like you're doing me some kind of favor. I'm the favor, honey. Whoopi was frantically trying to signal to the producers, her eyes wide with a desperate hope that someone in the control room would cut to commercial. Sarah looked like she was witnessing a murder in slow motion. Sunny was shaking her head in disbelief. Alyssa appeared to be taking mental notes on how to never end up in Joy's position. Joy tried to salvage some dignity, but her voice was weak and trembling. I think you're being completely unreasonable. Chaka tilted her head and smiled that dangerous smile again. Unreasonable, Joy? What's unreasonable is thinking you can disrespect a legend and not get called out for it. What's unreasonable is believing that your little corner of daytime television gives you the right to talk down to people who are breaking barriers while you are still figuring out how to work a microphone. Joy's voice was shaking now, a mix of anger and humiliation. I've been in television for decades, and yet you still haven't learned basic respect. Chaka fired back without hesitation. See, Joy, longevity doesn't equal quality. I've been in music for decades, too. But the difference is I've spent that time lifting people up, inspiring them, creating art that touches souls. She paused, her eyes boring into Joy's. You've spent your time sitting behind this desk thinking you're important because you can ask other people questions about their accomplishments. The audience was completely mesmerized. This wasn't just a celebrity confrontation anymore. This was a masterclass in how to dismantle someone's ego with surgical precision. Joy made one final desperate attempt to regain control. I think we should end this interview right now. Chaka laughed, a rich, full sound that filled the entire studio with its warmth and authority. Oh, you want to end the interview now? After you started all this drama? She shook her head slowly, the gesture one of genuine disbelief. Joy, you can't pick a fight with the Queen of Funk and then decide you want to quit when you realize you're outmatched. Joy was visibly trembling with rage and embarrassment now, her carefully constructed persona completely demolished. I did not pick a fight. You absolutely picked a fight, Chaka said, her voice steady as a rock. From the moment I sat down, you decided to test me. You thought I would be like all those other celebrities who come on here, smile politely, and let you treat them however you want. She paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow commanded more attention than any shout ever could. But I'm not them, Joy. I am Chaka Khan, and I didn't build a legendary career by backing down from bullies. The other hosts were completely silent, watching this masterpiece of verbal destruction unfold before their eyes. Joy had created this situation entirely by herself, and now she was paying the price. Joy's voice was barely above a whisper now, the fight drained out of her. I just don't think this is productive anymore. Chaka leaned forward one final time, her eyes locked on Joy's. You know what's not productive, Joy? Inviting someone onto your show and then spending the entire time trying to make them feel small so you can feel big. She paused, letting the accusation land. You know what else isn't productive? Thinking you can question my relevance when you're sitting across from living music history. Another pause, this one heavy with meaning. And you know what's really not productive? Not learning from this experience. Joy was completely defeated, her usual fire extinguished by someone who had faced down much tougher opponents than a daytime talk show host having a bad day. She sat in her chair, looking smaller than she had when the segment began. Chaka sat back in her chair, completely composed, like she had just finished a casual conversation about the weather. She smoothed her purple ensemble, her movements unhurried and elegant. Now, you wanted to talk about my music earlier. I have a new project that celebrates the power of resilience, of standing up for yourself, of not letting people dim your light, just because they're uncomfortable with how brightly it shines. She paused, her eyes never leaving Joy's. Would you like to hear about that? Or would you prefer to continue making this about your bruised ego? Joy couldn't even look at her anymore. I think maybe Whoopi should handle the rest of this. Whoopi jumped at the chance to salvage what was left of the segment, her voice bright and welcoming. Chaka, we'd love to hear about your new project. Chaka's entire demeanor changed instantly. The warrior who had been defending her dignity moments before transformed back into the gracious, accomplished artist she had always been. She turned to Whoopi with a warm smile, her voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. Thank you, Whoopi. You see, that's how you conduct an interview, with respect, with genuine interest, with professionalism. The contrast was stark and deliberate. Chaka was showing everyone in that studio exactly how the interview should have gone from the beginning. The difference between Joy's approach and Whoopi's couldn't have been more clear. As Chaka began discussing her music with Whoopi, her face lit up with passion, her hands gesturing as she described her creative process. Joy sat in her chair looking like she had just survived a natural disaster. The color had drained from her face, replaced by a pale, drawn expression that spoke of humbled defeat. The audience was still processing what they had witnessed. This wasn't just a clash between two personalities. This was a complete dismantling of someone who thought they could disrespect a legend and get away with it. The cameras captured every moment as Chaka transformed back into the gracious artist she had always been, laughing warmly, sharing stories, engaging with genuine enthusiasm. She gave Whoopi the interview that Joy had been incapable of delivering. But the message was clear to everyone watching. Respect is earned, not demanded. And when you try to diminish greatness, sometimes greatness diminishes you right back. Joy Behar had learned a lesson that day about what happens when you underestimate the power, intelligence, and grace of a true legend. Chaka Khan had reminded everyone why she's called the Queen of Funk, and it had nothing to do with her music and everything to do with her ability to command respect in any room she enters. The interview ended with Joy sitting in stunned silence, while Chaka graciously thanked the other hosts and walked off the set like the queen she had proven herself to be. Her heels clicked against the studio floor with the rhythm of someone who knows exactly who she is and has no apologies to make for it. The audience erupted, not with the polite applause that usually follows a guest segment, but with the kind of sustained, genuine appreciation that comes from witnessing something extraordinary. They had watched a legend defend her dignity with grace and precision, and they were letting her know they appreciated every moment of it. It was a moment that would be talked about for years. A perfect example of what happens when someone thinks they can play games with a legend and discovers they're completely out of their league. This was Chaka Khan showing the world that respect isn't optional. It's required. And when someone tries to take it from you, sometimes you have to take it right back with interest. The cameras captured Joy's face as Chaka walked off set. A mixture of shock, humiliation, and something that looked almost like grudging respect. She had been beaten at her own game, and she knew it. But the real lesson of that day went far beyond the confines of the studio. Chaka Khan had given a masterclass in something that applies to everyone, regardless of their profession or status. She had shown that you can stand up for yourself without losing your composure, that you can defend your dignity without descending to someone else's level, and that the most powerful response to disrespect is not anger, it's truth. The footage would go viral within hours, spreading across social media like wildfire. Comment sections would explode with praise for Chaka's composure and criticism of Joy's approach. Late-night hosts would riff on it for weeks. It would become one of the most talked-about moments in daytime television history. But for Chaka Khan, it was just another day, another moment in a career filled with moments of standing up for herself and her art. She had been doing it for 50 years, and she'd be doing it for 50 more if necessary. Because that's what legends do. They don't just create art. They create boundaries. And they protect those boundaries with everything they have. Joy Behar had learned that lesson the hard way. On live television, in front of millions of viewers with nowhere to hide. And she would never forget it. Make sure to subscribe for more incredible moments like this. And let us know in the comments. Do you think Joy Behar learned her lesson, or will she make the same mistake again with another guest?